Don't need to say anything here.
So the power to choose the race.
Okay, stay out.
Not really sure what he was trying to do with that.
Hello and welcome to the F1 Weekend Debrief, where we're reflecting on a fabulously entertaining German Grand Prix.
Why do you like the rain so much?
What's not to like? Well, we've taken shelter in F1 TV's Mission Control, and Rob, I'm sure this room was as busy as it was on the pit wall in Germany, but bigger picture, what were the trials that the engineers and the drivers would have faced in Germany?
It's always the same in a wet dry race. You've just got to keep your head. You've got to be cool. Make sure that you're making the right decisions. It's really important that you're not getting rushed into decisions. You've got all the information at hand. The fewer pit stops that you can make, being on the right tyre at the right time, they're fairly simple rules. Okay,
well, the only Mercedes presence on the podium was that of the race sponsor, because it was a win for Max Verstappen, and it all didn't look really like being that at the start. Quite astonishing. What happened to the Red Bulls at the start?
I mean, when I looked at it afterwards, I think that the torque map that the drivers are trying to control the torque to, so the engine power, if you like, which is going to the rear wheels, is just too peaky for those conditions. They just can't get away. If you look, Max is in and out the throttle, I think, about 4 or 5 times.
But Gasly's the same. Listen to this. Weird.
Yeah, really weird. But that's what I say. I think that if you look, it's, as they're going on and off the pedal, the torque map is really steep, and they just can't control it, so they're getting an awful lot of wheel spin. When you look at it, as we will do at Romain Grosjean's camera, you can see that he has, the revs are much more progressive and he can get the torque down.
Well, this is the view from the Haas behind, and actually he had a decent go of getting past Pierre Gasly, his countryman.
Well, yeah, I think he does get past. He almost makes it up to Max. And then Max comes back a little bit into corner one. But you can, when you listen to that, you can hear that the revs and the engine torque going to the rear wheels is just much more progressive. It's not as peaky as it was with that Red Bull Honda.
It looked even worse from the helicopter. But what is this? A Honda thing as well? And because in the dry, I mean, with the exception of the Austrian Grand Prix, it hasn't been too bad for Red Bull, the starts.
No, they've been very good, and the Austria issue was something entirely different. So it's just something that they're going to have to get on top of. It's an engine mapping thing, a torque map, that you've got to use for between the wet and the dry. So it'll just be something that the guys will be having a look back at the factory this week, and they'll put it right. Okay,
well, Verstappen certainly put it right, and he did have a spin like lots of other drivers, but this one was just a sort of simple 360 pirouette. He's lucky he didn't damage the floor on that sausage curb, though. But after this, what were the moves that Max made that actually won him the race?
Well, decisively, what happened was when the safety car came out for Charles, Max dived into the pits. Lewis, at that point, as we're going to see later on, was having his own problems, let's call it. And what that meant was that he was in the pit lane and Valtteri couldn't get in. So that he was, so Lewis was essentially blocking the pit box for Valtteri to make that stop under the safety car.
Okay.
Max could then get in and get back out, back onto the inner tyre, and at that point he's leading the race.
But jumped. That's where he jumped Bottas.
But that's where he jumped Bottas. Yeah. But then, to be absolutely fair to Max, whether he's on the intermediate tyre or whether he was on the dry tyre, each and every time he pulled away from he was the class of the field. Once he was out front, he was the absolute class of the field, and he pulled away. Then there was a safety car, it all Constantine back up. He would do the same again. So another safety car, and he did the same again. So every single time he was the class of the field. He absolutely deserved the win.
He did indeed. Well, joining Max Verstappen on the podium was Sebastian Vettel, who finished P2 from P20, last of all on the grid after Ferrari had a couple of reliability problem with an intercooler for Vettel in qualifying. And we've seen the pressure that the Ferrari bosses are under Rob, and you know, it seems like, well, they haven't won a championship since you were there, 2007, with Kimi Räikkönen. But back then, let's have a look at the bosses themselves. Jean Todt, he was there. Ross Brawn was in charge of the technical department. 7 constructors championships, 6 world drivers championships, 98 wins. Incredible.
He just built that team. You know, he was absolutely a person who would only employ the best people and put the best people around him. And that culture then cascaded down. You know, you really felt that culture cascaded down. I learned a lot from that. You know, I learned a lot that's if you want to make a successful organisation, then the people who would work for me, you know, I would want to employ people who were better than me. And that cascades down to the next level, and so on and so forth. So you've just got this huge organisation who, you know, started to get that self-belief. They believed in themselves. Great technical team who turned out a great car. You know, great race operations who knew how to run that car. In the end, you know, it was kind of unstoppable.
Well, Jean Todt's anointed successor was Stefano Domenicali, of course, and under his reign, Ferrari did score a Constructors' Championship and 20 wins. Then came Marco Mattiacci. He didn't last too long before Maurizio Arrivabene came along. 13 wins for Arrivabene, and even though Binotto has replaced him with 11 races so far and no wins for Binotto, we tend to forget that Arrivabene actually had quite a successful tenure.
Yeah, no, in terms of wins per race, yeah, I think he's almost up there with what Stefano was doing. You know, you got Jean, and then afterwards Stefano was, you know, who did have a good tenure. He had a 6-year tenure, Stefano, at Ferrari, and he was a very good boss and ran a tight ship. Formula One was changing at that time, and he had to manage that transition, and that's a key difference between what Jean did before and what Stefano was left with and had to do. As you say, Maurizio Arrivabene, you know, he's got some good numbers, he's got some good stats. I guess in the end, he just wasn't the right fit for Ferrari. So now Mattia's come in.
Mattia, of course, Binotto, a technical man, and we could see how he was, you know, feeling the pressure, wasn't he? In those moments in qualifying, he was pacing up and down the pit lane. But then came the race, and it was a good save for them, for Vettel, wasn't it? It was at home, putting right what went wrong last year.
Well, I think Seb's done a fantastic race. I really do. He's been pitch perfect for the whole race, you know, right the way through it. And you know, I would say he was fairly average. You wouldn't mind me saying he was fairly average on the intermediate tyre in the middle part of the race. But then afterwards, once he got on the dry tyre, he had it all to do. You know, he's coming from quite far back, and he just sliced through the field. He showed great pace and great tenacity.
Charles Leclerc, his teammate, though, of course, had a spin on the ice rink and then crashed into the wall, was very angry with himself. Plenty of people did this, but I don't know, how long can you say that he's still learning?
You're always learning. I mean, come on, you can't say that, you can't pick Charles out just because he ran into the wall there, and he's learning. You know, you got a 5-time world champion, did exactly the same thing, and took the wing off. So you know, Charles is a great driver. He's a great talent. You know, he is an absolute star right now, and he will be an even bigger star in the future. He's just made a mistake. You know, he's angry with himself. I know that from the inner circle. He's really angry with himself and upset with what's gone on. He'll bounce back. Yep.
Oh, I like the sound of the inner circle. But tell us what was going on at the Ferrari pit stops, because this really sort of typified some of the chaos we saw in the garages. And well, it's amazing actually. They come out with slick tyres, but the engineer needs to be clear on the radio, right? Tell us what this is like down here.
Well, this is looking a little bit like a circus, but you know, they weren't the only ones, and I've certainly been in that situation many times before. Seb's coming in, the engineers haven't called the right tyres, they've called a soft tyre or a dry tyre. The guys have brought a dry tyre out, and then what happens is actually they've then changed their mind and they're bringing the right tyre out, thank goodness, because Seb's just about to come into the pits. You can see there he is, so they just made it on time. They get the intermediate tyre on, and then he's back off. So even though there was this kerfuffle in the pit lane, it didn't actually affect Seb's stop. You know, he was able to get in and out in a reasonable time and have the right tyre on the car as well. That's a crucial bit. And then you know, that's kept track position and kept him in the running.
Now, what went wrong for Mercedes-Benz? Rob, it was obviously an important race for Mercedes. The new chairman of the board was there. In fact, most of the board was there. And they painted the cars to celebrate 125 years of motorsport. They'd all come to work in vintage clothes to celebrate 125 years of Mercedes in motorsport. Toto Wolff talked about karma. He talked about taking focus off what they normally do with all of these celebrations. What do you feel he meant?
Well, I get it, to be honest. I was 100%. I watched your interview, in fact, Ted, with Toto after the race, where he talked about that. And I think, you know, it's so important in a sporting event at the absolute, you know, the ultra high pressure sporting event that Formula One is, that you just maintain the same focus, the same process, the same procedure, and you just keep going through it. And you're all the time, you know, trying to do the same thing. Especially when you've got a winning formula and not introduce anything new to that. So all right, they come, you know, in fancy dress or whatever it was for the 125th year of Mercedes, but that just takes a tiny bit of focus off what they should have been doing. You know, maybe the guys were chatting between themselves about what they were wearing. There'll have been a little bit of banter about it, you know, and we don't want to make it too rigid. But again, you can't let the focus be on things that, you know, other than the racing and winning and delivering, which is what, you know, Mercedes wanted to be doing, and that's what Toto was talking about at the end.
Okay, well, Lewis Hamilton had gone a long way to getting the weekend off to the best possible start, battling illness. He'd qualified on pole position, and he'd led very convincingly for the first 20 or 25 laps. But then there was that agonising decision as to whether to go onto dry tyres, and this is how it played out on team radio.
Okay, Liz, so box.
These tires are nearly bored anyways.
Copy. So we're stuck on dry, as is Valtteri.
Which tyre?
So medium for both cars, Bottas and Verstappen.
Doesn't sound like the right tyre.
Position 1. Then your wet position 1 is the tyre that will get us to the end.
Can you understand Hamilton's reticence? I mean, but surely he's you know, one of the best with Verstappen in the wet conditions. He could handle a dry tyre, couldn't he?
Yeah, but you can still understand it. You know, it's so at that point he's got the race. You know, it's his to lose, yep. Which is exactly what he talked about doing afterwards. And it's just you know, he's got some margin there. He's pulled out a good gap. He's got Valtteri behind him as the buffer, and then Max behind him. So he just doesn't want to. He doesn't need to be rushed into a decision, and that's all he's talking about. He just wants to make sure that they're doing the right thing. You know, it's difficult. It's not an easy decision. You know, I've been in that situation many times before, and it's not clear cut. If it was clear cut, everyone, you know, no one would be. Right. Everyone would be on the same tyre. They weren't. I think we had probably 3 different tyre types at that point in the race.
Yep. So they should have stayed on the green intermediates. Hamilton should have played safe and put another set of inters on. We know that now.
We know that now, and that's exactly what Nico Hülkenberg did, which then elevated right up the order. He just stayed on the intermediate. He didn't make that switch to the dry tyre. But you know, you're always in a situation that all of a sudden, if the track gets a little bit drier, then the dry tyre is going to turn on, and you're going to be 2, 3, 4 seconds a lap quicker. And that's the point that, you know, that's the trepidation or the decision that you've got to make between the engineers and the driver.
Well, of course he didn't. He was on the dry tyres, and then came the spin on the ice rink, the bit that's normally nice and grippy. This is the 360-degree camera. No one's seen this before, and this is just agonising. If you're Hamilton, it's just after Leclerc went off. Yeah,
well, you actually see Charles's car. If you look there, there's Charles's car just on the left as he goes past, just dinks the wall. You know, if it can happen to Lewis, it can happen to absolutely everybody. The best driver in the world right now.
Straight in the pits, missing the bollard, for which he got a 5-second penalty.
For which he got a 5-second penalty, and then we had the kerfuffle, which I think is probably, if anything, made Toto cross at the end of the race. This was probably one of them. Well,
why should he be cross? Because when the car is that close to the pits, and it was a bit of difficulty, maybe they were expecting, we think they were expecting Bottas, and no one had said, maybe they were out in the pit lane, the mechanics hadn't seen that he would need a new front wing. But someone should have told them.
Well, you know, maybe Lewis didn't even know that he needed a new front wing, and it's difficult for the pit wall to notice that. You know, it's a really difficult situation. I was once involved in a pit stop that was probably a similar amount of time to that one, where we had the wrong tyres on the car. It's painful, and it seems to last an hour, not 50 seconds. You know, none of the guys have set out to do that. It's just a really painful situation. Lewis has crashed almost at the pit entry, and then has perhaps decided to come in. You know, that may not have been well communicated. Obviously, the pit wall to the guys hasn't been well communicated. There's just a lot of stuff going on that everybody's trying to deal with, and the communication at that point is not great. They've finally got the car ready and it's ready to go. But them things take, you know, it feels like hours when you're in the middle of it, and I really do feel for the guys.
In that situation, is it just one voice? Would it have just been one voice on the radio from engineer to pits? Would it have just been you or Peter Bonington just saying, doing this, or would there have been confusion on the radio as well?
No, I mean the teams are very different now as well, because we're much better resourced in terms of people. So you've got a strategist, you've got a tyre guy, you've got the race engineer, you've got the team manager who's usually, you know, making some of them calls to get the guys out of the garage. So you've got a chain of command, and that chain of command has got to be really slick. The problem is once it slips over, once it trips over, then you'll get this confusion in the chain of command, and that's the bit that Mercedes will probably take away now. Look at, sit down. You've got to sit down in an air-conditioned room and just go through everything with absolute, you know, a fine-tooth comb and say, right, well, what did we do wrong, and where did the communication break down? Because that's what that was. There wasn't a problem particularly of process, it's communication.
Okay, all right. Well, a bit later on, Hamilton had another spin, 360, managed to catch it as well. But then came this team radio message.
Okay, so box for new soft tyres. Let us know if you need a flap adjust.
Retire the car.
Negative, Lewis, negative. There's always opportunities.
Well, obviously Lewis didn't retire the car and actually scored 2 points towards the end. He was just letting off steam, wasn't he? Did he really think that they were going to say, oh yeah, come in?
No. Well, that would be good, wouldn't it, if they'd have actually called his bluff? I mean, they're never going to do it, but they said, all right, yeah, let's retire. You know, he's a five-time world champion. He's been in this situation so many times of just, you know, nicking a few points here and there, which is exactly what he did on Sunday. He was never going to retire the car. He's just getting so frustrated, you know, and I feel for the lad as well. He's kind of he's up there, he's winning the race, and now he's back and he's out the points. So he's obviously got himself in a bit of a tiz there. You know, we all do. It just shows he's human. But he's got himself back together, and he has got a couple of points at the end.
Yep, okay, there weren't any points for Valtteri Bottas, who was told to push and then had this spin and ended up taking the front corner off.
Whoopa.
Understandable?
Yeah, understandable. You know, it's a really fast corner in turn one, and it caught quite a few people out. Caught Lewis out in exactly the same corner, and he's just unfortunately didn't get it back round and straightened up before he's gone into the wall.
Well, two teams who definitely got it right were Racing Point and Toro Rosso. Indeed, Danny Kvyat ended up on the podium in third, and Lance Stroll was fourth. But who got it right first? It was Stroll, and this pit stop on lap 44.
Lap 44, exactly as you say. So they were brave. You know, they were coming from almost the back of the field, but they were brave. They got the slick tyre on before anybody else, and it was decisive. It suddenly found them a couple of 3 seconds, and then everybody else followed suit. So it was exactly what people had tried to do at the start of the race, around about that lap 27, 28, when people were getting the dry tyres on. This time it was the right decision, and Racing Point made it.
Okay, but tell me about engineers' remorse. If you had made the wrong decision earlier on, putting the dry tyres on in this part of the race, would you have then thought about it later on and thought, oh, I'm not going to make that mistake again, and not been as proactive in putting the dry tyres on at the end?
Yeah, it's the natural tendency to let the previous decisions, especially wrong decisions, cloud your judgment. But you know, as you get, it's something that I would always feel quite heavily in my younger days. As you get more experience, you can tend to just put it behind you. And especially when you're trying to run a pit wall, you've got to watch that other people aren't doing that as well, and sometimes give people words of encouragement. Just say, look, it doesn't matter. We've made a mistake. Let's just get on with it now, and let's focus on what we're doing next, because what's happened we can't change.
Yeah. Okay. So Toro Rosso saw what Stroll had done, and then 1 lap later they pitted him. Ferrari waited 2 laps later after Stroll to put Sebastian Vettel on dry tyres, but towards the end, Kvyat almost caught Vettel.
He did, yeah. I think that Sebastian, as you can see here, he makes a bit of a mistake. And then Daniel's right on his gearbox, and then he's again the same as they come into the stadium section around Sachs curving. In fact, I noticed that Sebastian does brake a little bit early here on most of the laps, and Daniel has a different line through there. But then that line is causing him to be a bit slower on the exit as well. But you know, he's taking his chances there and trying to do something. So it was a good battle right towards the end.
It was, wasn't it? And a good result for Robert Kubica as well. After the Alphas were disqualified, and it's still under appeal, so we should probably say provisionally, he sets a new record for the longest wait between points. Robert Kubica, 8 years, 8 months since Abu Dhabi 2010. Happy for him?
Good old Bobby K. I'm very happy. He's my mate. So yeah, I'm over the moon for him.
So am I.
He was happy as well.
Yeah, good for him. Well, let's pick up on that Alpha disqualification. It was after the start, and I don't really understand something about clutches and torque demand. If we have a look at the start from the onboards of the Alphas, what, the clutch malfunction gave them a better start?
Well, it's basically you've got a certain amount of time. The system has a certain amount of time from when the driver drops the clutch to a position, and that then gives the system a torque demand, and then the clutch has a certain amount of time within which to get to that demand that the driver's asking for. That's 70 milliseconds, and with the Alphas it was more like 250. So it was between 4 and even getting towards 5 times more. The reality of what happens there in the car is that the clutch is slipping. So on a wet track like this, it's giving them a bit of an advantage. The driver drops to a certain position, and then there's this nice progressive, smooth clutch slip all the way up to when the driver makes another move and fully engages the clutch. So I guess there was an advantage. The explanation afterwards was that something happened under the safety car. You know, there's probably a certain set of conditions within the software that were met under the safety car condition coming round to the start, which then switched over to some different setting. I don't know. I mean, we'll hopefully find out a little bit more in the appeal. Okay, all right. Yeah, well, as Rob says, Alpha have said that they will appeal, so we'll see what happens there. But something that's definitely happening, and it's happening this weekend, is the Hungarian Grand Prix. Well, we've had 3 great races, 3 great sets of fans. Hungary's next. Hopefully we're going to have the same. Yeah, hope so. It usually puts on a good spectacle. You know, the crowd there, they absolutely love their Formula One. They support. All the drivers get massive support. All the teams get massive support. It's a circuit where you need a lot of downforce. Downforce is paramount. It's a little bit like Monaco, where drag and power is a little bit less important. So I guess we're going to get some good racing. Okay, that's the checkered flag for us. Thank you very much for watching. Rob, thanks for your company, and join us after the Hungarian Grand Prix for a mid-season debrief with some very special guests. But for now, from all of us here, stay dry, and we'll see you after the Hungarian Grand Prix. Bye-bye.